Greetings, everyone. I've attempted on several occasions to give an introduction to the video that you're about to watch. It's a conversation that I had with Karen Elkins, who has for a good decade published a magazine called Science to Sage. And over the last several years, she has also worked very diligently to compile many contributions from the writers who have been published in her magazine into a book. And what I have been remiss at, which we're rectifying here, is giving really the essence right from the title itself. It's easy to look at the main part that says Inside Out, but it takes a bit more to really get a feel for what this is about. Revealing the mysteries of creation and the wisdom to live your life consciously connected. Consciously connected. That opens all types of subjects. It goes everywhere and every when. And with that, we're going to have a subtitle, a sub-conversation. Actually, a special interest of mine is going to be about water. But with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Karen Elkins. Sometimes the best way of getting things started is to simply start. And we're with Karen Elkins. She's the author of a book called Inside Out. That's the book, Inside Out. And quite frankly, it's like no book I've ever seen. Karen, to start, let's give an overview of the book, because there's some specifics we want to talk about, but let's give us an overview of the book itself.
The Overbook is it's a journey into the scientific and mystical journey. That's kind of what it is. Mm-hmm. And my question was how did God create? So over the course of doing 10 years of magazines and kind of being woken up to do a book, it gives you a tapestry of the science, the art, and the ancient philosophy and global philosophy of humanity, and it shows how from liquid solids and gases, or water, fire, air, which are the same thing, how from ancient wisdom to modern science there's a convergence of ideas, there's a commonality, and you get to the point where you understand it is all one. But you arrive there, and then you begin to see how it weaves its web, whether it's particles, light, and air. How does it weave reality? How does it come into the matrix? How does it become a holographic universe? It's really quite an interesting journey. The book has over 60 scientists in it, some of my own revelations, and it's got 3,000 images. It's not a book that you have to read, per se, but it is a book that will guide you visually through the understanding of a lot of the Hermetic principles, as above, so below, so within, so the soul. So it shows the same phenomenon in outer space as it is in inner space, and as it is in your body. So it really brings all the patterns together.
So, and we jump right into talking about the book, Inside Out, but I failed to mention that you have published this an equally, I'll say, amazing magazine called Science to Sage. And so a lot of what's in the book, what you say was derived from the relationships and the knowledge and the contacts you through producing the magazine?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done the magazine for 10 years. There's already 70 of them. And I, in my infancy of beginning the magazine, it was because I was putting on events for best-selling authors in Vancouver, BC. And then all of a sudden, I was beginning to unraveling some of the questions that I've always had. Right. And it was really fun. And 70 magazine later, my own weaving. I think what I've done why you haven't seen a book like it, most people stick in their particular discipline. And what I do is I bridge all the disciplines, I bridge all the world cultures, and I show how in a lot of ways there's a lot of similarities. And then the other thing I do, I'm a pattern connect. So I see patterns. So if I see patterns in outer space that are the same as in the human cell, everything from the eye to the brain, the way we've actually reimagined and recreated everything, but how all these three things literally create everything. They operate outer space to our inner space. And then when you learn that, you go, okay, I'm still responsible. I'm still one that's regulating my breath, what I say, what I take in. And you begin to realize then also that water is the canvas for life. Water is the thing that holds the memory, that transports the information. It's the thing that we... It literally is the canvas. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. And within water is air, and the particles, and the way that they discharge even in the water. So you can see all of the fundamental principles happening in this one thing. And what I got was the only difference between liquid solids and gases was the density of the packing. And that's when you realize it's one as a recycling system. And that makes life pretty interesting.
Well, you can say recycling, you can say transformational system, transmutational, all of those things.
Alchemical?
Alchemical, right. Chemical and alchemical, etc. That is true. In fact, I was thinking of Walter Russell, who basically, not say basically, he said so many different things, yes, but one of his assessments was that all that exists is simply permutations of one source. One material, if you will, creates everything. And in one regard, our society, our social structure today is, you might say, secularism run amok. It's all specialists, it's all this, to the point that we've lost sight of how doing this thing affects and interacts with and essentially changes something else. And everyone goes roughshod into all of their particular specialties.
Right.
And what you're basically doing is gathering it all together.
And then I'm linking them and taking them in a sort of a sequential way of understanding the nature. So if you're talking about Walter Russell, he's definitely in the book. There's a famous chart of his that you can see the wave, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's basically giving you right, left, you know, positive, negative. And as it builds, you're building actually the atomic structure. But you're also changing color and frequency and light and sound and geometry as you go with it.
And
so
he's
it's
also,
all entwined.
And he's also showing octaves. He's showing, for example, he talked about like carbon. Carbon and oxygen have this relationship. Oxygen being carbon at a higher octave. It essentially is the same thing at a higher octave. So it's that transmutation and transformational quality is shown in that, because we tend to think that, well, this element, whatever it is always that and nothing else. And essentially you have, based on frequencies and oscillations and stuff like that, you see a transformation of one into something else.
Yeah, I think it's carbon into diamonds, is it not? I mean,
well,
one is the pressure, heat.
Graphite is carbon.
Yeah.
Diamonds are carbon. They're all equally carbon, but they're all very different forms of it.
Yeah.
Very, very, very true. The other thing, and there's one other thing, there are many, many other things, because you cover so much. Oh, I was talking about frequencies. And what we're going to eventually jump into some insights that you share in the book about water. But I think this is a nice lead into it, talking about frequencies relative to cymatics. Would you talk a little bit about that, first of all, about what cymatics is and how it's, because it's in the book too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, excuse me, I thought so. All right. Talk a little bit about that, because it does relate to water too.
Well, you know, when there's a, what is it, Henning, what was his name? Jennings. I can't remember his name. But what you see is when you put water or you put sand and you put a frequency underneath it,
yes,
you begin to see a vibrational shape that shows up. And there's a person by the name of John Stuart Reed who's done a hellacious amount of work. It's gorgeous work, where you can see that certain frequencies literally take on the imprint of a particular animal, a particular skin, or a particular something. And the place you actually can also see it is in the stained glass windows in the churches, because it's actually showing you the evolution. I mean, people may think that the windows themselves or stained glass windows are really nice geometry, but the geometry is the fabric of creation and life itself. It's the holographic nature. And he actually did a presentation where you had the cymatics, you could see the windows and the flexing and how they went from one geometry form to another. It's beautiful, but they do create reality. They do create and shape what we see. I think that goes back to me when I look at somebody like Gerald Pollack's work with the fourth basis of water, the way that I kind of sort of understood it my own way. When you're talking about carbon, there's these different layers in the water, and they're like, imagine that they're grids, and every time you put a different grid, you create a different something. You can create a Karen, or you can create a create a cat, Kate, or whatever. Each of these different light grids, as they move, create different geometries and different ways of looking at reality.
And you could call it structures.
It is structures.
Yeah, exactly.
And those structures are light forms, literally spinning through time and space. And that's when we come up with the idea of, when you think of cymatics, we think of sound, you think of the sine and the cosine wave. So people are usually looking at the sine going this way. But as it oscillates, the other creates angles. And these angles are angles of light, whether you imagine that as your planet or you actually flying through the galaxy, through space, and each one has a nodal point. And as we turn and flip and spin, we create different sound structures and different geometries. And that's why when you even look into the universe, there's cymatics actually happening there, because as we dance through the planets, we're actually creating different songs and different frequencies as we're driving through. We're not static, and nothing's staying stationary.
Yes, exactly true, of which two things. Relative to cymatics, first of all, when we typically see cymatics, it's a plane, a flat plane. There's some sand, or there's some material, or it can be done in water too. And we tend to see this on a playing out on a horizontal plane. But and the cool thing is that as you change the frequency of oscillations, you will create different shapes, and yet you turn back to, you can go on and come back to that same frequency. The shape will come back to that. So the frequency and the form that is they are interlocked, so to speak.
That goes back to, imagine Kepler's work. And so Kepler talked about nested vortices, and he talked about something called Platonic solids, which certain sounds create certain shapes. And with those shapes, they nest. And even our universe, he noticed that they were nested. And he had this, kind of, I'm going to call it like a gyroscope that had all the different nested systems in it. So each sound has a geometry that goes along with the frequency. And so then you begin to understand your voice does exactly the same thing when you speak. Your brain sends those frequencies, the planet sends those frequencies, and your DNA literally weaves the same sort of way, the same sort of spinning. And it actually, most people look at DNA it this way, but if you do a cross section and you hold it up, it's a flower. So I mean, it's you see that life literally through the weave creates and flowers life. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at that.
And motion is the motive force. It's a part of how this occurs. Changes in motion, changes in directionality, all of those things are a part of it. Everything is in motion, even that which is the solid is that we know, they're still oscillating in one way, in a stable way. Okay, the stability of the oscillation also influences the stability, so to speak, of the manifestation, I guess you might say.
You're talking about every little drop of water has a positive and negative pole. Everything is basically working, and it creates that oscillation that goes back to right, left, positive, negative. And so when you look at the magnetic field, you still have the center point, and then you always have the right and the left, which is a positive and negative. If you ever look at when you're going into a mosque or a church, you will see that there's 3 doors. That's what it represents. It represents that you're actually coming into the center, or there's the right and the left, and that weave begins to create reality. That is actually what creates the flower of life. That's exactly, and that according to Walter Thornhill, which is the electric universe, that's an electrical discharge pattern. And when you look at it, that is the same pattern you see on a pine cone. It is the same pattern you see with the golden ratio, right? So it is a thing that literally spins out your eyes and spins out your nose and spins out your ear. And literally the way the planets are arranged, it's almost in that same ratio.
Yeah, amazing.
So it is amazing how spectacular it is, because you see that even in outer space, and how the planets and the nebula and the cat's eyes and all these things show the DNA, and you see eyes, you see cell division. Out in outer space, the same thing that happens.
As above, so below.
So within.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So your book is very visual in amazing ways. To me, it's like a work of art, you know, and it engenders not just an appreciation for nature. I think an awe for it, which, in contrast to our social structures of today, we're thinking some totally different. We're down. And I think we're down not only in our awness of nature, but in our awareness of these awesome things that are being done under the radar, of our consciousness and our awareness. But water is right there. Water is either making this stuff happen or breaking it down. So talk a little bit about how water is talked about in your book.
Well, first, it's how water is the campus. It really talks about like how the cymatics works and how it imprints in nature. And then it goes into showing you how you see the fire in water, you see the air bubbles in water, you see that all the dynamics are living, and actually in all the living systems, they're all living. When you go into the building, imagine of the bubbles, creating different geometries, you begin to see that these bubbles are really creating the chemistry that are the building blocks of everything that happens. And what brings us to light in the water is the dynamic nature of the fire, the air, the spirit that's in it. And it is the part that we share. It is the transport system that runs in every cell of your body. You're 99.9% water at a molecular level. So then you realize, imagine when you say we're all one, but it's all kind of moving through ether. We're kind of ether moving through space. And it is the part that imprints the vibration that you have, the eminence, the way you express yourself, the way other people receive you. It's literally in your field all the time. And that is expressed because there was a water bridge experiment where they showed, here's like you are a beaker and I'm a beaker. And in that there's always a point where you disconnect, but there's a point when you're together where you're always connecting.
Right, there was a charge that was put through it. And they start separating it.
They start separating, and you see the light in it, you see the particles in it, you see the charge in it. So as two beakers are together, or two cells are together, imagine just even how the sun represents, plays with the earth, and the dynamic, exchange that happens, and the effects that we have on each other. But that's through the ether, and that is a finer form of water. So imagine the ether and water are somewhat the same. If you look in the book, in the section of space, you'll see that the visual dynamics, take the color out, the same exact look, same exact imprint. And so water is where we dance. Water and the whole thing is the whole canvas. Water is where as I said before, where your memory is. And again, then what you're emanating. So when we look at the other way, I know that it works with you and what you're working on, when we look at plants and we look at life itself, it needs to be charged. And so one of the things we've done with our own water supply is flatlined it when we bring it into houses and put it in plastic and do these things and assume that the water that we're drinking is healthy. And it is not. The water we need to drink has to have a charge, has to have the bubbles, have to have light. And as you've known with the things that you're doing, as you bring water like into farms or into hospitals or into schools, and people are drinking water that is healthy, it's moving, it's got charge to it, it alivens all your cells, then all of a sudden things get healthier. You've seen that with the studies done with farm animals. You've seen it What happens with plants all of a sudden, when they have the charge and all the things that they're supposed to have that are elemental,
Shift happens.
shift happens, and you need 30% less of it. So that would really help with the water situation. And the other thing is that plants grow bigger because now they have energy that's been gifted to them.
Yeah, we talk also about function, because in our society we think of water in basically 3 or 4 states: solids, liquids, and gas, and now with Pollock's work, a 4th phase, so to speak.
Yeah.
But so we think of them in states in a simplistic way. But within the wet phase, as I call it, there are many variations and gradations of state. There's only one sweet spot, say in the center. In the center, you have function, and that function is associated with motility. Okay, and that's spin, that's velocity, and order. The order of movement, so to speak, the orchestration of movement. Because water that has that spin, it does have charge. It has that orchestration of movement. It's like the ice skater that does the twirl, and now they pull their wings in, and they're spinning like the dickens, and all in balance. Then they're stable. That's what's happening, and there for years there's been the term, and I got this insight just this morning. Okay, I'm just going to tell you what I'm about to say. You don't even know what I'm about to say.
Nope.
Okay, so the term structured water, to me, has always been somewhat nebulous. Okay, because I saw the results, I accepted, okay, structured water, whatever. But it's like, all right, okay, fine.
How is it structured?
Okay, and so it dawned on me that structuring, or a state of being structured, was a result of something else, which for me, I saw it was the motion, and the motion of the vortex. And but this new insight this morning, as opposed to calling it even structured water, it would be more appropriate, as I see it now, to call it structuring. It's water, if water is not structuring, or should I say when water is able to be structuring, now you've got the building blocks, you've got the functionality, you've got, for example, if water is structuring, it's functional, it gets into cells, it's small, it's moving, it's charged, it has all the properties that allow building to occur. Okay, so that's the structuring, and now you can have the small growing to the large because it's stable. Those things start to happen. If it's a plant, if it's an animal, if it's a person for that matter, the most fundamental part of our immune system is a hydrated cell. And cellular hydration, cells don't accept anything but water in a certain state. Okay, and that movement, that stability, that structure, that spin makes it able to be taken up to deliver charge. It also allows it to carry its information into the cells. The cells don't take the solids, they take the information. Okay, if we give the environment the information, the cells take it in because the water can get in. They will accept, they're a bit more discerning and discriminating than we are, okay, in that respect.
You know, when you're talking about that, okay, there's another thing. Most people think that water's just one thing. And then when you look at, there's actually light water and water that's kind of in the middle, but there's also heavy water.
All of those.
And so all of those things, the heavy water is deuterium water, and that's what we created the bomb with. And it's because it's more, more packing in or whatever. It's got another element.
More density.
And so what's interesting is most of the water on the planet right now is deuterium. It's heavy water. And so our bodies are having a hard time. There's a few manufacturers that are actually manufacturing deuterium depleted water. And they're finding, without all that stuff to clog up all your cells and it helps with the ATP function, that all of a sudden your body is actually flowing and it's moving. So even when we think of even Pollock's 4th phase of water, then we go into the structure of water itself, and it's just not one thing. You know, it's funny, everything turns out to be in threes. I think that's something Keeley came up with. You know, you look at particles, they arrange in threes. You look at light, it's got the blue, red, and green, right? And then you look at how water structures, and it starts with, with the triangle. Everything starts that way. So they're all three moving 3, 6, 9. I think when you get that, you see that it is that tandem of things, arranging, recycling, always working. So as though they think it's separate, it's not. You're going to get more of one or the other at any given time. So water's the canvas, it's the mother, the medium, and the matrix is how it's been said.
I concur. It certainly is. It's the form. It's the formless form. I mean, form is allowed to occur because it is so malleable, and it can be as, I'm not going to say weak, but as soft or as strong as the case may be. I mean, I had a picture of a tree, and that tree had grown. There was this huge rock, and that tree had split. It was a boulder. I mean, this is a big, and there was a tree that had grown right through it. And what was inside there to give it that strength? It was water. You know, I mean...
And charge.
And charge, absolutely.
Because the electricity runs up through it. And that's the current that goes up. That's how the water moves up the tree. It's with the current.
Exactly. And water can be an insulator or a conductor. All of these things. And one other thing to mention is consciousness itself. Water's responsiveness to and interaction with consciousness. We, in our society, we don't talk about it, we don't think about it. And so when we are thinking chaotic thoughts, which a lot of folks are these days, it's affecting the integrity of the order, and you might say the ordering abilities of the water within us. Okay? Emoto's work. Okay, he did that rice test, the 3 jars, and he said, okay, all praise to this one, vile thoughts to the other, and just ignored the third one. And the one that deteriorated the quickest was the one that was ignored altogether.
Yeah.
No energy was given to it at all.
Yep.
Dr. Emoto has conducted another interesting experiment. He placed rice into 3 glass beakers and covered it with water. And then every day for a month, he said, "Thank you" to one beaker, "You're an idiot" to the second, and the third one he completely ignored. After 1 month, the rice that had been thanked began to ferment, giving off a strong, pleasant aroma. The rice in the second beaker turned black, and the rice that was ignored began to rot.
So
We did that with the kids in school when we're doing the school, and indifference.
indifference, yes.
There's no charge, there's no energy. At least even when it's negative, there's a charge.
Well, there's a message in there to everyone, given for us to take stock of the quality of our thoughts and our thinking.
Yeah.
Because we are inclined to think because it's our imagination, or it's just our thoughts, or even if it's our, I'm going to say, our words, even that we're whispering to ourselves and we're not saying, they are still, the water hears it all.
Well, I just did an issue with a gentleman who's 80 years old, who's done a ton of peer-reviewed papers. He would take a strand of hair, and in it, you could see, when he pulled it out, he put it under a really high-powered microscope, you can see the field coming into it. You see literally the waves coming in, and as they solidify, you see the crystalline structures. And so you see in time and space the energy moving towards you. You can see it actually when you're detoxing, pulling bubbles out. And you imagine that happening, which is one strand. Imagine your whole hair. Imagine being in a crowd. Imagine that you can see the whole dynamics of energy oscillating within the field. And you can see the field is alive. And he actually showed it between plants and like an ant, and ants to ants, and all of a sudden you see the fuzz go in and you see the interchange and the energy going. Well, we think that that's kind of like woo-woo when you look at things like what is it, HeartMath, where they show the field. This actually shows the field. And it's like, wow, okay, so now you actually know you're actually receiving crystalline information. And it is crystalline. It's just, it's remarkable to see, slowed down. So we're always in, like you call it, a holographic universe. It is a light matrix. And all of a sudden, the crystals are just showing you exactly how they do it.
In so many ways, people talk about how when you look at an atom of something, and you look at the components, the electrons and the proton, nucleus and stuff like that, is the main constituent of that structure is space. Okay, typically the percentage or proportions of space between the center and the outer rings are huge and large. And essentially, in spite of how we appear, we are mostly space. And I will say this, that we are also, we're mostly water in another form too, because I will say that even in our dream worlds and our dream experiences, water is everywhere. Water is those places too.
Yep.
And so that will get us into talking about interdimensionality and other things, which is not a topic of this particular video. I'm just saying, all right?
But you know what you did say, though? One thing that water has in it is dendritical structures. So, I mean, if you look at your hand, it's a dendritical. Your body goes from here to here to here. It's a third, 2/3 to 3/3.
Proportions,
right?
yes.
And that goes the golden ratio. But that's how particles distribute. And that's how everything then literally unfolds in that triangle, which then you take it and you bend it, and now you begin to get fractals. And then through every Platonic solid becomes one thing. It comes from the triangle. As Plato said, it's the surface of everything. And as it is the building block for all of the frequencies and all of the sounds, and where does it come from? Liquid, solids, and gases. Right? And so you begin to see, there's your oneness. There's the dynamic creation, all spinning itself through these fractals. And it goes from chaos to order and chaos to order, because that's how it builds on its atomic structure.
And they're all necessary.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. Okay? And so when you recognize the oneness, and then we focus on this one particular area and think, oh, this is bad and we got to get rid of it. But you know, if you get rid of this, you get rid of everything. It can't be without it. So we have the freedom to choose where in this entire matrix we want to be. Each one of us can. And so that can take us, some people say, well, I'm not the bad, I want to be the good. And then, of course, I don't know what the people who are we thinking of as bad, or the things that we're thinking of as bad, what do they think? But ultimately, there's a oneness of it all. And we are an integral part of the whole. And certainly water is the thread, all of the stuff that weaves it all together.
In answering your comment just right there before, I remember listening to this thing called The Journey of the Angels, and it really impressed one thing on me. It's that everything is energy. So everything is either dancing with energy, consuming energy, trying to, so if you look at the way the power structures literally are, and things that are good or bad, are they in balance or are they not in balance? Is something overtaking? You can look at how countries go in and take other people's resources, or how they use people. It's all energy. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it is a dance, and part of us are here to be creative beings, to do the things that we do. And sometimes there's certain power structures that create such an incredible imbalance. And I think what people are looking for is that balance, and they're looking for their freedom and their liberty to be expressed. And I think the dynamics that is literally going on in our space and time right now is for those who would like to be in control about just about everything, and then the other ones of us going, well, wait a second, excuse me, I'm here with my time and space. I know what I'm here to do, and I don't need you running interference, And so I think there is a battle for the soul at the moment.
I concur. I'll say, I'm going to say this.
Go for it.
The words that come to me, that there is an avarice for the soul.
What do you mean by an avarice?
Avarice? Avarice is this hunger and longing for something someone else has. That's avarice. It's not greed per se, but it's in the direction of that. It's a wanting, a strong and actually unfulfillable wanting for something that someone else has.
But isn't that also part of the evolution? You see something and it drives you to the next place, or something that you could become, or something that you would evolve to.
Well,
it could be if it's done right.
Okay. There are two parts to that.
Okay.
One of them has to do is if you're wanting someone else's.
Oh.
As opposed to realizing it's within you to create it.
Right. Oh, okay.
Big difference. Okay.
There's a big
All right.
difference.
Okay.
I'll concur with that.
All right then. So that's how it's a great amount of avarice, which is being taught and promoted as being normal, when ultimately it cannot be fulfilled. Fulfillment comes from within us, and it's a choice, because we are free to choose good as we see it, whatever that is, bad as we see it, whatever that is, or oneness if we see it. Okay,
Well,
and then embrace
I get that, but I can't even say. I was always wondering how God created and how He did it and how could it all be one. And when
Excuse me, you have to be all-knowing in order to even come to the figuring all that out. Why figure out something that you... this is space and time.
Well, this was an evolution for me. This was an evolution and learning and uncovering, and I'd keep getting another aha and another one, and then I'd do another magazine. I thought I was done with the book, and I thought, oh my God, that's got to go in. That is just like too juicy not to leave in, and it creates a bigger part of the tapestry. So it is an unfolding and a learning, and so for me, that was amazing.
Well, I tell you what. If you like this conversation, consider this part of an unfolding and a learning, because there's so much to be talked about, so much that Karen has done. Would you be considered more the editor of this book or the author? What it's a compendium.
It is. It's an amalgamation of my ahas. It's an amalgamation of 60 different scientists. It's ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
And part of it is going through and seeing very similar icons around the planet. So for example, you can go to the temples in China, and you will see the flower of life.
Right.
You can get yourself all the way to India at the Taj Mahal, and you will see this vortex, which is like what Rodin talks about, on the top of the ceiling, which mirrors it perfectly, which is still the flower unfolding. You go to you go all the way to Egypt, to whatever, to even America, and you're seeing, the dream catcher. They're all the same pattern. And they all knew something at one time, and they kept it through antiquity.
Well, and the truth is, too, the meaning of those forms and stuff have tended to be stable over all these different cultures and all these different times and everything else. And so that even gets into the question of truth and the presence of it, and what path are we walking on, because when we're in a time where edicts are being put out, and I don't even know if they're even masquerading. People don't ask about truth anymore. They don't question or demand truth, because if it's true, it's not a political thing. It's not. The truth is what it is, and it has occurred to me to present another term called truth to our society today. But it's spelled Trooth.
Okay.
You all right?
I'm visualizing that one.
Well, Trooth is what we've been getting. That's if you want to talk about truth. Okay. But it's not true.
Yeah.
What's true? And if it's true, anyone can seek it, find it, and even appreciate it and conceptualize it, because our common sense, there's things that we know is true, and if we're not following it, something is telling us.
Well, the one thing that we all know is true, and you know and we both know it's true. God didn't create something here that He didn't give you a solution for.
Absolutely.
Whether it was the herbs or your immunity or whatever. And I think what is true is when we as man keep mucking and creating and experimenting and making viruses and doing things, we're destroying our planet. We're destroying our whole ecosystem, and we're not living in the wisdom that we've been given. And it's a very, very sad thing. And to think that you need to put junk in your body to make it resistant, when we know right now there are things that can heal.
Mm-hmm.
So
there are people who have healed. Healing has happened from the beginning of disease, dis-ease.
yes,
Okay, I had a talk, no one's heard yet, but it was in time, where I talked about dis-ease being the precursors of disease.
right.
And dis-ease being, or disease being dis-ease, not dealt with and allowed to fester. That these are all internal and interrelational type situations too.
You know, that goes back to water.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for doing that.
You know, it goes back to water for one reason, because the solution that literally lives in your body is your chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the chemical nature. And when some people have instant remissions,
Yes.
it's like the geometry in you has had a miracle. It's had literally a reset. It has been enlightened. It has transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And it can happen. That's why the miracles happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so even during tumor times, the brain is 90% water. It's looking literally for the solution. And we don't even think of it that way. Mm-hmm. But it is. It is the solution. And it is the chemistry, and the air and the oxygen and everything we breathe in creates that chemistry for our body. And it's our responsibility, if we choose to, not to as you do, to say, what is it I need to do? What is it I need to look at? What is it I can do better? Mm-hmm. And some of it, unfortunately, these days, we're having chemically induced things, unfortunately.
No, it's
But,
true.
So that's not just for everybody to feel like they're, I think there's a mixture of things going on.
We started this conversation, I talked about the awesomeness of nature and the beauty of it. Your book is awesome, and just, even if you don't read it, I think some people just look at the pictures and get blown away by them. But when you actually connect the dots associated with those pictures, you just, the awesome level just grows. And we've had a drought in awesomeness relative to understanding, appreciating not only nature, its power, and its resilience and recuperability. And as you learn more about it, including consciousness in terms of how we think, you can't have healing and health happen when you're thinking unhealth and disease or destruction, including fear and despair and all those other things. And we're getting reminded of reasons to be fearful all the time from outside. Now, we can let those reminders in, or we can stop them. We can become our own gatekeepers,
right,
and protect the sanctity of what's in us and our thoughts that are in us. And my point is that, I think I lost my point, but
the awesomeness of nature.
It was really a great point. But the point basically is this: the awesomeness of nature, the awesomeness of what our Constitution is. We have a Constitution inside us that is absolutely awesome.
It is.
And the ability, you talk about chemicals, there is that intelligence has the ability to manufacture or deconstruct any kind of chemistry that's in us is already within us, unless we think it isn't, or unless we think something that someone has told us about is so strong that we can't do it. These are all falsehoods, and we can only be subject to it if we buy into it and not seek to know from ourselves.
I think when you talk about the awesomeness of nature, and I think we could probably close with this one, is the idea that the book shows us the connections everywhere. It shows how we are part of the web.
Yep.
And on the cover, Greg Braden did the review of the book, and he said the one thing that was really key: this book will teach you to live more consciously connected, because you'll see your connection to the web.
Cool-a-roo.
Thank you,
Book
Adam.
is Inside Out, put together lovingly and I want to say patiently and everything else by Karen Elkins.
Thank you.
Someone I am happy to say is my friend.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.